Hey everyone, how's it going? Welcome to the very first of our Hands-on with Maxon Beginner Cinema 4D workshops in version 25. I'm joined, as
Woo!
always, with my good friend and fellow UK trainer, Matt. How's it going, Matt?
Hello. It's all right, thank you. How are you? Are you excited for this one?
I am. I mean, it's no surprise. This is probably one of my favorite things that we do is this hands-on course. So some people may be aware that we actually ran this at the start of the year in version 24. And so it's a little bit of like a repeat course, but we're going to do like a bunch of different scenes. We can also include some of the new stuff now. And it's also going to be in, the totally new 25 UI, which we're going to see very shortly. So, right, let's get into it. So the idea of this whole course is to get you guys comfortable in Cinema 4D in just 6 weeks. And so it's going to be a bit of a mix between kind of some technical and some like theory mixed with some practical stuff as well. So we have the luxury of having 2 whole hours with you guys, and so we can do loads of Q&A. We can do, we can really get into learning all about Cinema 4D and just sort of like getting up and running. So a bit about the course. So it's split into 6 weeks, and me and Matt had a bit of a chat, and we kind of looked at like the main disciplines of getting started in Cinema 4D. So week 1, which is today, is a whole getting started. And so we're going to look at the new bits in 25, as well as how to kind of access 25 and download it. And then looking at like primitives, deformers, and all that kind of stuff, like moving around the interface, all that kind of useful stuff that's going to kick off our journey over the next 6 weeks. Week 2, we're going to look at modeling as well as the new Illustrator spline importer. Week 3, we're going to basically start to make things look good with lighting and materials. Week 4, animation and dynamics. Week 5, my designated favorite is MoGraph. And then we round it all off with week 6, looking at rendering inside of Cinema 4D's standard and physical renderer. So who are we? Matt, did you want to do a little intro of yourself for everyone?
I don't know. Who am I?
Who are you? Why are you
Who
here?
am I? Why am I here? Hello. So I'm Matt. I've worked for Maxon for now 4.5 years. So I've been a trainer and I'm tech support. So sometimes if you're coming into Cinema 4D tech support and customer service, you'll get a response from me. But also, so I've been using Cinema 4D for now 21 years, ever since version 6. So this is
Wow,
quite a yeah, this is
we're in
quite
good
an interesting
hands.
but this is quite an interesting take because obviously we've got a massive interface change, which I'm not going to lie, has interrupted my muscle memory. You know, after 20 years of knowing where everything is, I have had a few hiccups using it. So you will have to bear with me as I get used to the new interface, just as the rest of you will.
We'll all be doing it together. We're learning it together. Cool. Yeah. And so I'm Elly. I'm one of the trainers at Maxon. Been here for just over 6 years. Yeah, been sort of like doing a lot more training, I guess, over the last kind of year or two. Some of these courses, presentations, 3D motion show, which I was lucky enough to be on last night, which was a lot of fun. And yeah, just kind
How
of
was
like
that?
it would, you know what, it was so much fun. Like I really love doing like the 3D motion show and like being part of like the chat, like live Q&A, and obviously like Matthias is just a bit of a legend, isn't he? Like he's very cool. And I think that's you can check it out on YouTube and have a look at some of that stuff if you want to. But I'm sure some of that stuff, because it's very MoGraph related, my presentation, I'm sure we can maybe dive into some of it in week 6 or week 5.
Right. Yeah.
See, I've already forgotten what we're doing these weeks. Okay, cool. Right, so let's kind of get into it and let's have a look at what we're going to be doing over the next kind of 2 hours. So we're going to have a brief like look at what's new in 25, just sort of like a little chat between some of these like new features between me and Matt. And then Matt's going to show us how to navigate around the new Cinema 4D interface. So, we have new like hot corners, we've got new dynamic palettes, lots of new stuff that we can be learning, hopefully quite quickly. And we're going to pick up some simple shortcuts that are going to help us work a lot faster. So kind of like camera movements and all that kind of fun stuff. We're then going to learn how to create, move, scale, and rotate primitive objects. So these all come included inside of Cinema 4D as like standard. And then we also have new placement tools. When I say new, they came out in 24, but I don't know if like everyone's kind of had a look at them yet or even like known they're there. And they're super handy when it comes to placing objects on other objects. So we're definitely going to kind of dive into those. And then we're also going to look at how deformers work and how we can use them on our primitives to start to create some really interesting kind of geometry. And then we're also going to look at the Cinema 4D asset browser, where we can find a whole bunch of free stuff like textures, models, a bunch of like really cool assets. And then in the second half, we're going to be building our robot. And so if we kind of go back, we can see our little robot guy here, and he's made up entirely of only primitives and deformers. And so I thought it'd be really fun to make this guy again. So let's get started. And so also just to mention, we want this to be as interactive as possible. Me and Matt love answering your questions. Like we love being like a whole little community here. And so let us know where you're from. Give us a shout out, say a hi. Hey to Jay, hey to Barry. Good afternoon to you guys. It's nice to have you all here. And yeah, so Matt, did you want to kind of take over? Hey to Daniel as well. Nice to see you guys.
Yeah, you just beat me to what I was going to say. If you guys have any questions or anything like that, about what it is that we're talking about, we're here to show you like the beginner's course. So most of our questions we'll ask if you kind of keep them related to what we're doing. If you want any advanced questions, we have another type of webinar that we will send you a link to called Ask the Trainer, which is basically when there's a whole horde of Maxon trainers in a session and you can ask us really complicated and convoluted questions and we'll try our best. But for this kind of stuff, we're looking to just sort of answer questions largely about, the subjects and topics that we are going through. Show my screen. So one of the things that you guys probably need to be aware of is how to get Cinema 4D R25, which is what we're about to go through if you haven't already. So the easiest way is to head over to maxon.net and you can go to our try page, which is, I know it's a bit odd. You can either go to support or try. Try is the quickest way from directly on the site, and you download the Maxon app. Okay, the Maxon app is Maxon's new sort of coagulated licensing system. So people who were used to the Red Giant tools were very similar, were used to the similar Red Giant application manager, and this is an evolution of that. And the application, God, I'm getting confused. The Maxon app allows you to download and install our products. So this is Cinema 4D R25, which I've downloaded straight from there. And also my latest Redshift as well. We won't be going much through Redshift, but nonetheless, this is the easiest way to install and update all of your pieces of software. So if you are a student and you have the Maxon 1 student bundle, then this is the easiest way to install and manage all of your Maxon software. So Cinema 4D is there. Once it's installed, you'll need to head off to your start menu to find it. I am petitioning for a launch button there because it'd be really helpful. So I already have Cinema 4D loaded, but you should be able to find a Maxon Cinema 4D R25 folder. And in there, you will find, funnily enough, your Cinema 4D R25, which is here. So as you can see, for those people who have used Cinema 4D before, the interface has had a brand new refresh. So when the last refresh was done, I think it was like 11 years ago, there was something like a certain number of icons available. And with the latest version, because of the number of features that we've added, there was literally double the number of icons. So as you can see, the entire interface has had a new refresh. All of the icons have been streamlined and simplified. The layout has been streamlined as well, and it brings us really interestingly new features. Particularly for me, I have to say, I quite like the dynamic palette, and I like the new Cinema 4D hot corners. For those of you who have not seen Cinema 4D before, then this is nice, isn't it? You wouldn't know any different. So you can see that we've got a whole host of different icons here, and I'm going to go through sort of fairly quickly the different areas that you can see in front of you. Obviously, the big thing that we have in front of us is the viewport. This is the thing that our 3D world is created in. Okay, I'll go through more about camera controls and everything in a mo, but you can see this is my infinite 3D universe. On the left-hand side, I have my dynamic palette. Okay, this will change depending on what options I have selected at the top. So these will show relevant tools depending on which one of these up here are selected. Okay, I'll come to those in a minute. We have our selection tool, so this is quite simple. So what selections do I want to work with? And our main tools that most people will use: move, rotate, and scale. Again, I'll come to those actually in a minute. Pride of place, finally, in Cinema 4D's layout is the commander. Okay, this is your ability to search for anything inside of Cinema 4D, be it a tool, a command, an object, anything like that. So if I start typing in orbit, an orbit camera appears. If I start typing in extrude or EXT, then it will show you all of the things that work with EXT. Not only that, but it will also show you the shortcuts that work with them as well, which is super helpful. So that is a really useful thing that it's been in Cinema 4D for years, but unless you knew it, it was kind of hidden. So to bring that up was Shift C, or you can press the little magnifying glass here. Okay. I'll ignore this button. We'll come to the hot corner stuff in a minute. You've got your axis locking and your world dynamics. Okay. And then along here, we have the different modes that you can use. So we have our object mode, which funnily enough is for moving objects, or model mode, sorry, object mode is underneath. You've also got polygon mode, and you can see that my dynamic palette has changed to more useful tools that relate to being in a polygon mode. Edge mode, they change again, and point mode. These will become more relevant when we start doing more modeling stuff next week. For the moment, we're largely going to stick with this one. Okay, so we need to make sure that we are on model mode. We've got our textures and our access tools. We've got snapping, and we've got what's this one? All snap settings. You can see that this is a completely new layout for me. So there's lots of lovely stuff that's appeared. We've got the work plane, which to be honest, I never really touch. You've got the ability of soloing, soft selections, which is again comes more in relevance when we're using polygon modes. And then we've got our soloing, which allows you to get rid of stuff on a scene and just solo out everything else. And we've got our render settings. Okay, and we've got another one of our hot corners. Okay. On the right-hand side, we have our objects manager, and this is the list of all of the things that we have inside of Cinema 4D's scene. So if I create a cube, you can see that it will appear slowly. Oh, there we go. This is my graphics card. And you can see that I now have a cube, and I have my layers button that I have before. I have my visible in editor, and I have my Fong tag. So there's quite a lot here that we can, get to grips with, but we'll come to all of those in a minute. And if I've got more than one cube, you can see that, funnily enough, I can see a list of those here. We've got a take system, which we don't go through in the beginner's course. Down the bottom here, we have our attributes manager. And this is the attributes of whatever it is we have selected. This is one of my cats. And you can see that if I have a cube selected, you'll be able to see that I have the attributes for that cube. And those attributes include the size in X, Y, and Z, the number of segments. You've got different sliders that you can change. You can individually click each one of those. If you want to be more accurate, you can put in a specific number. And you've got a whole host of different tabs here as well that allow you to see more information about the cube. If I have my move tool selected, you will see that my attributes manager will show me information about my move tool. So this attributes tab will show you an awful lot of information depending on whatever it is that you have selected. Okay, down the bottom here, we have our streamlined animation timeline. So you can see that I've got a preview timeline here, but it's not showing anything because nothing is animated. And then I've got my forward plays and backs keyframes. I've got my keyframing buttons and my animation keyframes, and I've got the animation length here, which I can increase and decrease just simply by clicking and dragging with my mouse. So click and hold and drag with your mouse, or entering in a specific number, and you can do it that way. Okay, so let's look at some of the nice new things that we have here. There are a few things that have disappeared for those people who have used Cinema 4D before. And two of them that have disappeared from my standard layout are my materials manager, where I place all of my materials to make everything not grey, and my coordinates manager. And these two have been migrated to the new hot corners inside of Cinema 4D. So the first one exists up here next to my render settings, okay, and this is my materials manager. So if I click that, it will appear here. It used to appear down here in the bottom, but this is the new placement for the materials manager inside of Cinema 4D. And I can simply create a new material, and there it is. It makes it really easy, this positioning, to either drag and drop it to objects there or drag and drop it to objects there. We'll go through more about materials week 3.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of this new placement.
I am. That is super easy, rather than, because if you ever had to get to the material from the materials manager, which was down here, to the object, it was like possibly the longest drag from one side to another. So that was a pain. So
seems really minor, but it does make a nice little difference.
That's it. Click fatigue and mouse drag fatigue are a thing. You get bored of clicking things if you don't need to.
It's like tennis elbow, but Cinema 4D elbow.
Yeah, pretty much. So you can turn that on and off. You can just sit here and do it all night if you really want to, for your heart's delight. I'm going to leave that off for the moment. And the coordinates manager is down the bottom right-hand corner. And funnily enough, you'll see that the coordinates manager pops up in the bottom right-hand corner. This shows you the coordinates for the object, point, polygon, light, whatever it is that you have selected based on either one of our coordinate systems. And we have two coordinate systems in theory. We have the object coordinate system and the world coordinate system. And the world is, funnily enough, where is this cube in relation to the center of the universe, okay, which is just there. And you can see that here it is, and I can move it around and it will, oh, it'll update. Oh, I don't have to press apply anymore. That's so wonderful. However, if you want it to all ping back to normal, you can press reset transformation and that will put everything back at 0. The object system we will look at a little bit later on. Again, comes more into play when you're dealing with hierarchical stuff or modeling points. So that's one of the other hot corners. Now, this is on the left-hand side. This is probably also one of my favorite new placements. It's my timeline. Beforehand, you used to have to go up and you used to have to change your timeline, your layout to animate, or you used to have to bring up a timeline and then find an appropriate place to put this ridiculously large window. But here is my timeline, which I can just switch on and off, and it just makes life so much easier. The difference between this little one here, which we'll talk about again a bit later, is this one will only ever show keyframes of what you have selected, whereas this one will show your entire keyframe in your entire animation. So this is super, super useful. I'm just going to say goodbye to that. Leaving me with the last hot corner up here, the asset browser. So this has changed places from the right-hand side to the left-hand side now. And this is our online repository of stuff. That's probably the best way of putting it. This is all sorts of things inside of Cinema 4D that you guys can use. Anything from objects like, ooh, hey, look, Blender. Doors, windows. Sorry. You've got nodal material stuff. You've got node assets and creations and things, all sorts of wonderful things that you can look at. You can even search, so let's have a search for something. And there you go. Well, that's cheery. I've got a wooden axe. Guitars, anything that involves the word wood in it because it has been used that way. And it's a really super useful online thing. For those of you who used to use Cinema 4D before, our S24, this used to be a 12 gigabyte download, so it used to fill people's computers up pretty fast. So the fact that this is now online and you just download it when you want it makes life and space saving far.
And it's updated
easier.
like
yes.
weekly.
Frequently.
So before the content browser was the content browser, the asset browser, because it's now online, like anytime we have some great stuff, we just put it on there.
Which is a really, really super useful way of getting things out to you guys and making the most of your subscriptions to us. So I'm going to turn that one off. And another one of the new things that we have is this. We have a document palette. So you can see now actually what files you have open. Cinema 4D has always had the ability of having multiple files open, but it was a little bit hidden if you weren't aware that you had to go to Window and then swap between the two. But these two, and you can keep adding, and well, there's no point in having a third one because it would just overwrite the second because it's empty. But it means that you can see however many files you have open. And you do have up here the undo and redo button. They're a bit tiny, but there they are. So you can see I can undo and redo things up here. Along the top as well now, to make life easier for you guys, we have the different layouts available to you. So I am on standard layout mode. I can go to model layout mode, which to be honest doesn't look a great deal different, except the fact that it's completely got rid of any timeline down the bottom. The sculpt layout, funnily enough, now has all of the sculpt tools down the left-hand side, which is really nice. UV editing, for anybody that wants to edit UVs and see the UVs of the objects that you've got. Painting, if you're doing body painting. This is a new one, you can groom. So anybody who wants to use any of the hair tools inside of Cinema 4D, you've got the grooming layout. Tracking, if you're interested in doing any motion tracking. And scripting, for those people cleverer than I am who want to do any form of coding. You've even got a node layout as well that allows you to see the data inspector and the Cinema 4D scene nodes and the scene manager, which is here, which relates to scene nodes. If any of these icons or layouts are not to your liking and you think, I don't want them there, you can press this little plus button and go, I'm never coding ever. So I can turn off the script and it will be gone from my world there. Same as probably nodes for me. Possibly groom. Okay, but nonetheless, you can turn them on and turn them off. You can also, if you want, if you have a layout that you particularly enjoy, or you have icons that you can place anywhere and you go, I want to have this specific icon here all the time, then you can easily customize your layout. In window customization menu manager, I think, and you can, oh no, have they changed it? Command manager, there it is. So if you searched for something that you use all the time, I'm trying to think what I use all the time. Transfer. That's quite a useful tool. And you can click and drag and plop, there it is. I now have my transfer icon over there where I want it, which is, again, super useful. And if you want that to be there all the time, you can go to the little plus button and you can save as a layout, which if you just save as, it will appear as a layout, which then you can choose to go along here, or you can change and save it as a startup layout, which, funnily enough, will be the layout that Cinema 4D starts up with. Now, for those of you who are used to old Cinema 4D, as I am, we have this button. At the moment, the toggle is on because that's the default for using Cinema 4D R25 layouts. If I toggle that, I'm no longer using the new layouts, or rather, I now have the option to use the old layout. So if, I'll be honest, like me, it's going to take you a little while to get used to the new icons and remembering which one is which. You may find that I do indeed switch to the old layouts and choose the standard layout, which now has the old Cinema 4D layout with a few of the new additions, like the document palette along the top, which I think is quite nice. But the hot corners are effectively gone. So I think this is the R23 layout. So it's sort of like a standard default one. Another reason why Another reason why I am showing you this as well is because, of course, Cinema 4D has looked a certain way for about 20, 30 years, and we have an awful lot of tutorials that are still relevant to do with the processes, if not necessarily the icons. So one of the things that I want people certainly new to Cinema 4D to be aware of is that if you change your layout to an R23 layout, to turn it off and go to standard, whilst the icons will look different, their placement should be the same. So if you find an old tutorial with the old look, you can swap the layout back and it will allow you to kind of start figuring out the tutorial without being completely wiped away by a different layout with different icons. Okay. And then, of course, sorry, I forgot this little bar here. This is the stuff. This is all of the other cool stuff and all of the icons and lights and cameras and MoGraphs and primitives and all sorts of fun things that we create down here. Okay. That's probably a good place for me to pause, I think, with regards to the layout, isn't it? Do we have any questions thus far?
So there were a couple that I've answered, but I'll shout them out loud. So when you were using the commander, someone was asking, can you also see the redshift tools in there? And yes, you can, which is super handy. And someone was asking about saving your own assets into the asset browser.
Yes, you can. You can create your own database, and if you've got objects and files here, then you can add to database and you can choose where that database is created, whether it's in your own preferences, whether it's in the scene itself, or you can choose a new database file so that you can keep everything kind of stored neatly if you're that sort of person who likes doing that. And you can see that there's all sorts of things that I can add to the database. I can add the material to it, I can add the object, I can add the entire file. That sort of stuff is kind of really useful. You can also import assets. So if you had a previous .lib file, which used to be the old content browser, Cinema 4D's content browser, which in R25 has now completely gone, you can import the legacy library.lib4d file and it will convert it into an asset browser file for you.
Cool. And then just like a bunch of like nice comments about for a beginner, someone saying this new UI is better and more logical, which is obviously really lovely. It's lovely to hear because yeah, for us, especially when training kind of in this beginner's course, we want to make it as sort of like easy for you guys as possible. Yes. And yeah, so yeah. Thanks for everyone who's like joining in later and saying morning, saying afternoon. Thanks for being here and kind of either staying late or getting up super early.
Yes, thank you for that. We have to pick a time, don't we, where we can
yes,
where we can
we're
actually
both
do this
in the UK. We've tried to pick like a middle time. So yeah, we do appreciate it. But also, I don't know if I did say, these sessions are all going to be recorded and we're going to drop them onto a bit of a secret unlisted playlist just for you guys. So if it doesn't work out in your time, then no worries, you're going to get the link to the recording anyway.
Okay. Cool. So carrying on with my super exciting tour of 25, one of the things that I think a lot of people should be aware of is the edit preferences menu. Okay, not what most people would think would be the exciting part of 3D, and it's not the exciting part of 3D, but it is a useful one. So going to edit and preferences, there are a few things here that you can do. If you've got a different language, you can install a different language if you really want to, and you can choose the language that you've got here, which I think is quite useful for people who want to follow along in their own languages. The highlight feature, which has changed, and I now struggle to see what the highlights are. Does it have fading anymore? I can't see what new features are, what new things have been changed. It doesn't seem to show up for me anymore, does it, you, Elly? I think.
Sorry, I was answering cues. What?
There it is. Sorry, my fault. We've made it a lot more subtle, and I just had to do R24 to show it. So if there is a little yellow dot next to something, this is the highlighted feature of something that has changed in that version. So in R24, you can see that something had changed. In R23, there are a few others. R25, weirdly enough, there isn't, it's because the entire layout has changed as opposed to updates of certain things, but you will see the FDD has got one, and I can tell that because the little drop-down arrow there was slightly yellow. And you can see that the vector import, which Elly will get towards later on in the course, has some exciting things there. So that's something that's quite useful. But I'm going to leave most of that. I'm not going to go through every single one of these interface preferences, otherwise we'll be here forever. If you have a graphics tablet and you use a Windows machine, there will be a little button that says use graphics tablet. If you have, like me and Elly, which actually I need to do right now, if you have an Apple Mac and you have a Magic Mouse, the touch support is set to automatic detection, which means when I scroll with my mouse, it goes up and down. This is absolutely not the behavior that I am personally used to, and neither is Elly. So if you want to make that a scroll wheel, which will do what everything else does, which is zoom in and out, then I suggest you change that now. So that's input devices, touch support, scroll wheel. I'm glad we looked at that because that would have been infuriating. Navigation we will ignore, hardware viewport, but files. Files is something that I think people should be aware of, because under the basics, under the autosave, it is off by default. Okay, working in tech support, as I do, unfortunately, sometimes 3D files can get large and cumbersome, and sometimes saving files, particularly externally via a network, uploading to the internet, USB, dodgy file, whatever, it can go a little doolally and corrupt. And my first question is, do you have autosave on? And if the answer is no, there's very little I can do sometimes. So I very much recommend turning on autosave inside of Cinema 4D. However, I then also recommend changing the autosave from every 5 minutes, which will absolutely do your head in, to every 30. And I recommend then turning your backup copies to 14. So this basically means what it does, it creates a backup copy file. It doesn't just autosave over what you've got. It creates an actual backup file in the same directory as the project wherever you save this, in a folder called backup. And if you're saving every 30 minutes over 14 copies, you've basically got 7 hours worth of backups. And it just means that you've got basically an entire work day's worth of backups, just in case anything happens to happen to the file that you are using. So I absolutely recommend turning this on, because this will help you and save you in the end. And another really useful thing is to go to memory and change the undo length to something a little bit more useful. So I'm going to put that at 100, which means that you can click undo 100 times in the hope that if your backup files didn't work, that you have something that you can go back to. Other than that, in the preferences, which I think is some of the most important things, did I mention the autosave? That's pretty much it, I think, that is going to be useful for you to look at, unless you can think of anything else, Elly.
No, that's all good. Also, really quickly, I had a quick question. Stephen was wondering, you mentioned a scripting panel. Do you know which language is used?
I believe it's Python. Yeah, I believe it is a Python script. I can't tell you which version, but if you go up there, you should be able to see what you can code and work with. Okay.
Cool, thank you. Sorry.
That's right. Right, okay. I suppose it's actually starting using Cinema 4D now, isn't it?
Let's get into it.
I'm going to go up here and use one of my new document tabs. That's exciting. I like that. That's going to be so easy for me.
It's the little things.
Yeah, you will also see just how many open files I have when I do this training, and you'll be wondering how my mission
I'm going to be embarrassed with all my untitles.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. Mine will be the same. So let's talk about primitive objects. And primitive objects or parametric objects are objects that Cinema 4D calculates. And if I click here and click and hold, you can see I've got a large selection of primitive objects. If I just select the fuzzy thing at the top, it pops it out as a nice little menu, which I can then move around. But I can just demonstrate a few of the things that we can look at. So I can click a cube and my cube appears in my scene. Now I can move my object really simply with these little axis handles that appear automatically. So if I hover over one, I am locking myself. So if I click and hold with my mouse, I am locking my ability of moving only up and down, no matter whether my mouse is going right or left or not, on that particular axis. I can then also do it with the Z or the X. Okay, there are also these little axis corners. And if I click and hold on that one, then I can move it on a plane, which is basically two axes at once. Okay, but it's still locked, it's still not going up and down. Or I can choose that one up there and do it that way. So it's now going along the Z and Y axes, which is really useful. I'll just move that over there and I can create a cylinder. Okay, and once again, I can move my cylinder. You may also notice that my cylinder has a couple of these little orange dots. Okay. These allow you to organically control the shape of your primitive or parametric object. Now they are called parametric because they are created by their parameters. So the parameters that you need for a cylinder is the height parameter, how tall is my cylinder, and the radius of my cylinder, and therefore it creates a cylinder. There are three pieces of information that are required for a cube: the height, the width, and the depth. Okay, you can see that I've got these little orange dots that I can use in each direction in order to change my cube. And this is simply moving my objects around. Now, over here we have our basic tab, and this is the name of your object, and you can name that here, or you can double click and rename it here. I know it's not a tube, but it's whatever. This one. You can name it whatever you need it to. You can see the coordinates of that particular object. And under the object tab, you can see the specific information like the radius. And I've got this little slider I can use. I can also just click this one at a time. I can input information here if I want to, or I can click and drag. So I can, with my mouse in here, I can click and hold and move my mouse left to right to kind of scroll it as well, which is really useful. You can change the orientation of your cube, of your tube object. This is also something I really like. This used to be a drop down, but now I can actually press the buttons and choose which one I want it to be. So that is super helpful. Caps, you know, we'll have a look at fillets and caps and things later on the cube. So this is just simply moving things around with the move tool. Now you're on the move tool by default. Okay, it's over here, and I'm on the object model mode up here by default. And let's get rid of that window now. Bye. You can also rotate objects. So using the rotate tool, now something that's quite nice. If you hover over one of these tools, you will see it tells you the shortcut. So if you want to move, you can press E. If you want to rotate, it's R. If you want to, now it's called scale, but I like to think of it as transform. So E, R, and T, transform, E, R, T. So E will move your object around. R, I can rotate, I can grab the bands as I could before. Or if I grab the middle somewhere in a blank space, not on one of the bands, and click and hold, then I sort of free rotate, sorry, whee, and it'll just make it like it's spinning into existence. Command Z is undo, Control Z if you're on a PC. And then of course, T for transform and scale. Now this will scale your object no matter which handle you drag uniformly, because it's a scale tool and I'm scaling the object. If you want to adjust the size because it's a parametric object, I can still deal with the individual handles and then scale the whole thing up. So I can do the same here. I can scale that up and down. I can rotate. and I can rotate it particularly that way, and then I can move it along its axes like that. Okay, that super simply is how to move objects. Any questions on moving objects thus far?
So yeah, we have had a couple of questions actually.
Okay.
Sometimes when I try to move an object, it only moves the axis and the object stays in place. How do I fix this?
This can sometimes occur if you have made your object editable, which is something we will get to in a later episode, I suppose we'll call it an episode. So if I just make this object editable, and then if I have this tool selected, which is called Enable Axis Modification, which allows you to you can press L and it will turn it on. I can move my object axes, and you can see that it is now not just inside my object. Okay, that is something that people need to be aware of. You can't do it for an object that is not editable. So even though I have my tool on here, my cube will continue to follow it because my cube is not editable. So that is something to be aware of when moving, is making sure that you do or do not have this tool on, depending on what you do or do not want to move. Okay.
Sweet. Couple more, two more things. So one was, I think it was back when you were looking at the preferences.
Okay.
Justin was wondering, are there kind of like better memory settings you can use aside from the defaults if you have, let's say, like a machine with better memory or something like that?
Not particularly. Most of this sort of stuff you won't really need to deal with, but the most useful one is just upping that particular part. Most of these are specific to different things. If you do have more memory and you find that Cinema 4D is lagging, then you can change that if you want to. When it comes to memory stuff, you need to do things in values of the 16th. So if you want more than that, then I would times that by 2. So you can go 496. Or the renderer for displacement times 2. Everything is it's the exponential. So you know that you've got 8-bit, 16-bit, 32, 64, 128, 256, and then 512, 1024, 2048.
I was going to say, you're testing your maths now.
Yeah, that's it. After 2048, it's
finished.
4096, and then my maths trying to do that is 8,000.
Oh yeah, that number.
That number, yeah, work out on those, and that's better for memory. But most of you will not need to change any of those. It's just that the undo depth is particularly useful. That's all. Okay.
Cool. One quick one about, I think, what you're showing right now. If you wanted to move the cylinder straight up relative to the world plane, how would you do this?
Okay, that's a fun one. So the move tool has settings, as I sort of mentioned earlier. At the moment, my move tool is set to being relative to the object. So if I move my object this way, you can see that it is going either in the objects. But yeah, if you wanted to get this to go straight up in the world, if I go to my move tool, I have axes here, and I can apparently not select them. That's interesting. Why can I not?
There's also an icon for it, I think, next to the Z top left, or Z.
Oh yeah, sorry. Okay, that's not the way I normally do it, to be honest, but that's true. So this goes back to what I was saying earlier about the object coordinate system, so objects based on that way, or the world coordinate system, meaning that I can just then go based on the world's coordinates, move that straight up. I wonder if it's because it's not editable. That is editable. But... Oh, okay, it's because it's not does it in model mode. It's my fault, sorry. Yeah, so you can just simply swap between pointing it in that direction or straight up, this one up here, from world to object coordinate system, and then moving it straight up and down that way. Thank you.
Cool.
Anything else?
I think that's it for now. But yeah, everyone, keep
Okay,
your questions coming in, and we'll make sure we get to
sweet.
them.
Okay, so this is all very well and good that I have made my particularly beautiful and exciting scene here. What if I want to move around it? Well, at the moment, I've just been moving my objects around. What about me moving around my objects? Up here in the top right-hand corner, we have a selection of tools that we are going to look at. The first one is a hand. This is not stop. This is a move or pan camera. So if you click and hold with your left mouse button to activate it, you can see that it's still highlighted because my mouse is still clicked down. I can move my mouse around and I can pan. This is basically going left, right, and up and down in the 3D space. Fairly simple. This one, the second one, scale camera, it's interesting. This is effectively dollying the camera. So the camera is moving closer and further away from an object. It is not zooming. Zooming involves the camera standing where it is and changing the aperture and focal length so that it changes the zoom and the way that works, which is this one, which if you right click on that, you can see can completely distort. So I am now right clicking on that and it is zooming, whereas left clicking on that will dolly and it does something slightly different. Okay, and then we have the third one along, which rotates. And you can see that this rotates around this little crosshair that is in the middle of my viewport. So wherever I position my crosshair, and I move that by moving the camera, I will rotate around, orbit around, sorry, as it is now properly known, orbit around that particular object. Now, if you are the sort of person who likes shortcuts, then you can do this with your keyboard. So if you press F1, sorry, not F1, ignore that. If you press 1 on your keyboard and hold down 1 on your keyboard and move with the left mouse button, left and right, up and down, you can see that you pan. If I hold down the number 2 on my keyboard, you can see that I dolly in and out. And if I hold down number 3, you will see that I can rotate, orbit around an area. Now, what I like about this one is it will orbit around wherever my mouse was last when I click. So if I orbit around that corner, if I click and hold there, or I can click and hold there. So if I keep clicking and holding, I will orbit around wherever that moves. It's the same for dollying as well. So if I click and hold 2 and zoom, dolly into that part, or dolly into this part, or dolly out of that part, it works wherever my object was. And if I wanted to center my objects, I can press H on my keyboard. H will center and frame all active geometry. O on your keyboard will frame the active object, or S will do the selection, and then H to show everything again. If you can't remember those, they are under the view menu up here. You can see frame geometry, frame selected, frame all. Okay, so they are there, and that is accessible through view and then those 3. If also, like me, you find that those 1, 2, and 3 buttons are just too many shortcuts for you to remember, then the other option is to use the Alt or Option button. Depending on if you're on a PC, it is Alt. If you are on a Mac, it is the Option. So Option, left click, orbits around. Option right click with your mouse, dollies, and Option middle click pans around. Okay, so that is one of the most super useful things to be able to do that. So left, right, middle, left, right, middle means that I only ever have to have one finger on the keyboard, and the rest is all done through the positioning and the mouse button clicks that I can use there. Now, something to note very quickly is if I press undo, what I am undoing is the information in the scene, not my camera positions. So if I turn the camera around over here and I press undo, it's just undoing my previous selection and what's going on in the scene. If you want to undo what the camera is doing, then you need to go to undo, undo view here, and you can keep going through. And the shortcut for that is Command or Control if you're on a PC, Shift Z, or Command Shift Y to undo and redo moving around. Now the fourth button up here is really useful. This brings up a whole host of different views. You can see that I've got a perspective view, which is where my camera is. I then have a top view, a front view, and a side view. These are your orthographic views, and just by middle clicking on one of them, you can see that I am expanding that size. So that's another really easy way of moving in between all 4 views, and then depending on where my mouse is, let's make the front view bigger with the middle click, turn that back off, go back to the front view, perspective view, and it's all done with the middle click. It's really useful to be able to configure and see how things are if you want to move things around. And you can see the viewports are live. So whatever I do in one is instantly replicated completely live in all of the others. You can see that the views themselves are simplified just to make life easier to be able to see through things, but you can easily change your display information by going to display, ground shading. So now it is the same as that one. Or I can do ground shading and ground shading lines, and there you go. I can add that in instead. So it's a really useful way of quickly getting into the geometry and looking and just checking your views and working your way between all of them. Okay, any questions now?
Yeah, one quick question. So with regards to kind of shortcut moving around the screen, so you're kind of 1, 2, and 3, how would you do this if you don't have a mouse and you're using a laptop?
If you are using a laptop, then you should have a trackpad of some sort. So the trackpad should have buttons on it. Granted, it's not as pleasant. I'm on a MacBook Pro, so I empathise. This is why I have a mouse. So if I press 1 and I click with my trackpad, I can do that. If I press 2 and click and then use my trackpad, I can do that. And press 3 and click with my trackpad, I can do that as well. So 1, 2, and 3. I don't know how well that works with orbiting. Ooh, no, I don't think I have a middle clicks. So 2, 1, 2. Oh, okay, it works on my trackpad. So because it's a Mac, if I hold down Option and I scale, I can zoom in and out. If I just have the left button clicked and then I can orbit around, or if I have 2 fingers and I move around, I can do that. So it does kind of work, but it will entirely depend on your laptop. Okay, anything else?
Oh yeah, one more. If you're using a Magic Mouse,
yes, the middle mouse
middle
button.
click. We do get this question a few times.
We do. And the reason, and it's because for some unbeknownst reason, Apple refused to allow you to have a middle click on these mouse now. So I cheat, and I have a tiny little app up here called Magic Prefs. Okay, it's completely free. It is 9 years old. The website will say, please be aware we've not updated this in a decade. We can't guarantee it'll keep working, but it works. And it allows you to configure a middle mouse click, which is just immeasurably helpful for anybody doing any form of 3D. So you can see I can do, I've got one middle finger click, there you go, middle click. And I can even define the area that particular middle click. So if I want to be super specific, or over to the left or to the right or whatever. But that's Magic Press and not here, what I'm here to really show. But nonetheless, it is incredibly useful. Just Google Magic Press and it will make your life easier if you have a Magic Mouse.
Cool. I had another quick question.
Okay.
I'm not sure I 100% get it, but I miss how you popped out the primitives object into its own little window.
So when you click and hold on any drop-down palette or something like that, there is a little fuzzy bar at the top, and that little fuzzy bar allows you to go pop, and then you have to make the sound as well. Allows you to.
Otherwise, it doesn't work.
Yeah, that's it. It's magic. So you can always undock these And if you particularly want to, you can also dock these somewhere else using this little fuzzy bar. You can click and hold and drag it somewhere else, and you can see that, look, my God, let's fill up my entire, hey, this is starting to look like another 3D program, I know. You can see that it just creates so much stuff. And if you don't want them there, you can undock and then delete them if you don't want them. Bye-bye. Anything else?
I think that's it. And from Jeff can verify that the pop sound with your mouth does make it work. So verified
Excellent,
here,
good.
guys.
Thank you very much. Right, okay, so moving on very quickly, because I'm rapidly running out of time before we have to move on to actually Elly showing you some actual cool stuff. One of the things that was really, really nice in S24 was the dynamic placement tools. And this is something that basically people have been jumping up and down and wanting in cinema for decades. But it's really, really cool. So if I was to create something, let's create, where's the floor gone? Floor, there we go. Whoa. There it is. What I can do, let's say if I create a cube, one of the things that we get an awful lot is, how do I make it look like the cube is on there? Can I just place it on the floor? R23 and before? No, not easily. Can I move it up and down? Yeah, I can do it, and I can judge it, and I can use my 4 views, and I can have a look, and I can zoom in, and I can see whether or not it's there. Or, with the new dynamic placement tools, which I've now just got to remember where they've gone. There we go. The place tool, if I click and hold on that, look, there it is. It's straight on the ground, which is just super, super helpful.
I love
And
this
let's
feature.
say I create a sphere, and then I do that. Look, oh, it even does it to the object that's already on there. I can grab my scaling purple handle and I can make it really big, or I can make it really small. I can even rotate it, which you won't be able to notice on the sphere. But nonetheless, I can still click and move that around. And it applies it directly to the surface, which is just phenomenally useful.
No more like 4 views, zooming right in. Just
that's it. And there's like, is it clipping? Ah, sod it, no one will notice. Another one of the really nice placement tools is where is the scatter placement tool gone?
Yeah.
There it is. Is the scatter pen, which funnily enough does exactly what it says in the tin, which goes whee. Again, sound effects required. This allows you to select an object or selection of objects, and you can just randomly scatter this across. Now, the randoming or scattering can be changed by the information here. So you can see that because my scatter is still live, I am actually editing this particular scatter, and it is increasing the radius that it will create these objects and the object spacing and stuff like that, which I think is it's just so useful to just be able to go, wow, and randomly place stuff all over the world, which I think is just like super useful. Another super, super useful tool that was invented with S24 is the dynamic placement. Now, this is slightly different to, like, if I've got this one sphere, if you can see, it works a little bit more sort of like I'm hitting something. So let's create a new cube. And look at this, look at the stuff. It's interacting with everything on the ground, and I've got it stuck under the floor. That was a bad move. It's now wedged, but you can see that because whilst I have my mouse selected, or rather my left mouse button held down, I can also scroll in and out. I didn't realize I could do that. It is dynamically enabling this particular cube. So I can really quickly just make sure that it is dynamically up against other things and fill objects, and I can scale this one as well. Can I not scale that one? Blocking it, and just move it around, and it just makes placing stuff so much easier than it used to be. So they are 3 incredibly useful tools to have a look at, and you need to make sure that you are on model mode at the top, and then you will have access to move, scale, and rotate, your dynamic, your placing, your dynamic place, and your scattering. Okay, any questions on those three?
Ooh, this is quite a good one. Do these objects dynamically interact with all other objects, or can you choose which objects it will interact with?
I don't think so, because
That's a good question.
this is kind of in the background, quickly enabling dynamics to allow you to solidify objects on top of another. The moment you let go and stop using the tool, they are not dynamic objects anymore. I don't think you have the ability of choosing which objects will or will not work inside that, from what I see. So if I'm using this one to just bash into that cube, as far as it concerns, it will work with everything in the scene, because it's designed to be a placement tool rather than a dynamics effect, if you see what I mean. So yeah, I don't think you can't control that it will affect this cube, but it won't interact with the others.
Cool, thanks.
That's right. Anything else?
No, there was one quick question. It's kind of off topic, but I thought it'd be quite cool to maybe talk about for like 2 minutes.
Okay.
Someone was asking, is there a big difference between 23 and 25 besides the layout? They're currently working on 23 and they're wondering if they're going to be missing out on important features. And I mean, as they've said, yes, the UI is massively different. And I'd say probably like some major things that you potentially could be missing out on would be, I mean, asset browser for me is great.
Yes.
These tools came in at 24.
In 24, yeah, that's it. So if you're in 23, you are missing the dynamic placement tools that I've just shown you. So the scatter pen, the dynamic placement, and the placing of objects don't exist in 23. The asset browser, just being able to search for all of these really useful things without it taking up 12 gig on your machine, is something else that you are missing as well.
New spline importer,
user improvements, spline importer, which we will get to in 25. Capsules as part of that. The presets, to be honest, I've gone absolutely nowhere near.
We will look at those. Maybe in like when we do like some dynamics, we'll set up some presets in that week.
Presets, which is really, yeah, because you can basically preset pretty much anything in Cinema 4D now and save it as a preset that you want. You can preset cubes to come in at certain sizes, or you can preset certain attributes of cubes to do certain things. So if you're always having to do a cube that's 200 by 200 by 10, you can press that and it will just update that one item.
And you can then set that preset as the default, which is really
super
great.
useful. Yeah.
Super useful.
Okay,
cool.
Anything else?
Thanks. I think that's it for now, but yeah, keep them coming.
I'd better get on to Deformers then quickly, hadn't I? Could press this button.
Yes, and then we'll get into making some stuff.
Yes. Right, so as you may have noticed, my primitives are exactly as the name suggests, primitive. You can't do an awful lot with it. If I create my cube, I can make it taller, I can make it thinner, I can make it longer, I can make it wider, but it's still pretty cubey. It really doesn't do much else other than that. So we have certain things inside of Cinema 4D that, funnily enough, called deformers, that allow you to deform the objects in various different ways. Now I'm just going to set my cube to 200 by 600 by 200, and I'm going to press H because it just zooms it out, and it's me being lazy and not just using the scroll mouse. So that's quite useful. Now, over here on the right hand side, got to get used to that, is a bunch of really cool things called deformers. Okay. Now there's an awful lot of them. I will not be going through all of them, otherwise I'll be here forever. I'm only going to show you probably 2, because once I show you 2, you kind of get the theory. Okay. So I'm going to create a bend deformer. Now here I have the bend deformer and we have my cube. Now, if I move, you can see that my bend deformer, has a little orange dot and an arrow. It says it's going to point that way. And if I grab my orange dot, you can see that the arrows change and it bends. There is a definite bendy cube-like thing occurring here. But as you can see, it is not affecting my cube at all. Command Z to undo. This is because the two are yet to be associated with one another. To use this, what you do, you drag and drop. You have to create a hierarchy between the objects. And you take the deformer, this is the deformer, I will change something, and you click and hold with your left mouse button. And if I just drag it all the way down here, you can see that there is an arrow pointing that way for me. This means that I will rearrange my object manager. That's it. That's all it'll do. It'll just rearrange my object manager. It won't do anything else. If I click and hold and get that icon and then hover over the cube, you can see the arrow now points down. This means that it will put the bend deformer inside the cube. And if I let go, you can see I've now got a hierarchy, and very much like a sort of Windows file system hierarchy for files and folders. You can see I have a plus and minus button, and I have my parent object, the cube, and I have my bend deformer, the child. Now, I can grab the little orange handle, yellow dot, whatever you got it, or I can increase my strength down here. Well, now, this is not doing what we thought it was going to do. The bend deformer is now definitely having an effect on the cube, and the bend deformer is, as you can see, bending. The cube, however, is not. This is because my cube, by default, is made up of, by default, 6 sides, as you'd expect to have a cube, okay? It's also made up of 6 polygons, so it is only 1 polygon per side. Cinema 4D and other 3D packages do not know how to bend a polygon, because a polygon is flat. So it doesn't understand how to bend or what to bend. So what we need to do, we need to increase the number of segments that our cube is made up of. I'm going to make it easy so that you guys can see the polygons by going to display Gouraud shading lines. Boop. And now you can see that my cube has some black outlines around it. And if I go back to my cube primitive, you can see I've got some scales here. I've got some sliders, and I have segments Y1. And to make this really obvious, I'm going to make that 2. And you can see what happens. My cube is now made up of 1 cube high, 1 segment high, 2 segments high. Okay, the others are still 1, but where it has got a bend, or where it has got a segment, Cinema 4D understands, I can distort it around here. And now if I go 2, you can see that it continues to work, or 3, or 4, or 5, or let's just grab that scale and go whoop, whoop. Now, by default, the thing stops at 20, but that is just a maximum where the slider will stop. It is not a maximum of the number you can do. If you really want to, you can stick a 0 after that, make it 200. Gives me way more geometry than I actually need, but it does make it nice and smooth. And you can see that I've now got a bend deformer that is bending ever so nicely along here. And let's make that properly. Ooh, you can see if I scrub that around, it's like a sort of cubic slinky. You can also choose the angle that this goes around. So I'm just going to reset that to 0, reset that to 0, and you can see that I've now just got a blank box. So if I go to that, double click 90, and I have that bend deformer affecting what was in that particular box. Now, this is something that you need to be aware of here. This is limited, okay? So this is the mode that this works on. Limited means it will only affect what is inside the box. So this is the bit that bends, whereas the other end moves, and whereas the other end stays where it is. Within box, we'll literally only move what is within the box and the rest will stay there. Unlimited will continue that curvature around and outside of that box, no matter where the object is placed. So for limited, for example, I can move the bend deformer up and have the cube that it bends at the corner or all halfway through or down the bottom or whatever. Also increasing and decreasing the size of this, which I shall do with my scale tool, will increase and decrease the amount that this thing curves. So this is a really useful way of editing objects and creating different shapes. So You can also turn them off. So using the grey tick, why is it not a green tick anymore? That's disappointing. You can turn this on and off and it will just disappear. So it is no longer generating. With my cube, I'm going to create another one. Let's create, where's that gone? Twist. So I'm going to put the twist in the cube and I'm going to grab my little orange handle and I'm going to twist. And you can see I'm getting a nice twist round. I probably need to increase some segments again because I've only increased the height segment, so it's a little bit ropey around the edges. So let's go to my cube and let's just make that 50, 50, 50. Maybe not. Let's make it 100, 100, 100. And there we go. I'm going to hide my polygons by using NB. NA turns them off. NB turns them on. NA turns them off. That can all be done through up here, ground shading, quick shading, off. And here we have my twisted cube. And taking my twist, I can increase the size of its height. You can see I can do it that way. I can shrink it down and it will increase and change the way that my cube is twisted. Now, one of the things I love about deformers is the fact that you can have multiple deformers under an object. So I have my cube, I have my twist, and then I have my bend. And I'm going to turn my bend back on, and I now have a bent twisted cube. Okay, please be aware that the deformers are initiated hierarchically in order of height. So it does the twist first and then the bend. If I had it the other way around, I get a very different result because it bends something first, which does that, and then inside the twist deformer, it twists what was inside that box. So I get something very different and not as pretty as I wanted it. So you can just quickly rearrange these and getting a better result. And now, just something really super useful to teach you is if I wanted to hide my bend deformer and my twist deformer, because at the moment these purple lines are distracting, there's this little traffic light system up here. All of my objects inside Cinema 4D have these two little dots. The top is visible in Editor, which is this. The bottom is visible in Renderer, which is when you press render. If I press it once, it makes it green, which means that it will definitely be visible. If I make it red, it disappears. So clicking twice will make it disappear. Clicking a third time will return it back to grey. Okay, so I'm just going to press those and get rid of them. Oops, missed. And I now have my bent twisted cube, which to have done any other way would have been quite a lengthy procedure. But using the deformers is super simple. And that, very simply, is deformers inside of Cinema 4D.
Cool. So I've had a couple of questions, if that's cool. So this is a great one. Is there an automatic way to make the bend deformer the same size as the cube?
Yes.
Absolutely.
And that is in most of them. If I select one of my deformers, there is this fit to parent button, and that is exactly what it will do. It will fit the object to the parent. So if I just turn those off, let's create, just so that you can see, let's create a brand new bend deformer, put it inside the cube, and then fit to parent. And instantly it will fit itself to that object.
Cool, thanks. So do you know if there is a way you can select multiple attributes to change all at once?
Yes, you can, and it depends on the objects that you wish. So if I had a couple of cubes, or let's make it 3 cubes, let's be super exciting. So if I had 3 cubes and I selected all 3 of my cubes, shift select or control click, depending on what you want to do, you can see that the X size is the same on all 3 of them, so it displays the same. So I can scrub this in and out. And the Z size is currently the same, so I can scrub those in and out. At the moment, my Y size is different, as you can see from the height of this one. If I standardize it, then it will standardize all of them. So it depends on what it is that you want to change and work with. So if I had my 2 bend deformers, in theory, I could use both of them at the same time. Maybe if one was in a different object, perhaps. But you can do that sort of stuff. Yes.
Cool, thanks. for deformers, and this does relate to a lot of things as well, when you're doing like move, scale and rotate, is there a hotkey to snap adjustment increments to whole numbers?
Yes, there is. Thank you for that one.
There is. That's a great
If
one.
I want to rotate this, okay, you can see that it is doing it at any decimal integer. Now, I must start rotating first, and then if I hold down shift, it will lock it to 5-degree increments. This is a modifier key, so it must be done second. If I hold shift and then rotate, it won't do anything because it doesn't know what to modify. So I start to rotate and then press shift, and I can do things like that. If I have my move tool selected and I start to move and I hold down shift, it will also do it in 5 increments of 5. If you want to change the increments that this is done at, I've got to remember where that is. It is under mode in the attributes manager, modeling, quantize. There's one for you. So attributes manager, mode, modeling, quantize, and you can see that my move is set to 5 centimeters, my rotate is set to 5 degrees, my scale is set to 5%. So if you want to change those to 0.25 or 0.1 or 10, depending, you can do that, and that's what it will then quantize in afterwards.
Cool, thanks. So Pablo was wondering, you know your traffic light buttons?
Yes.
He's wondering what is the point of the kind of like the green light on the traffic lights, and what are those specifically used for?
Okay, so let me have a new scene, and let me have a cube, and I have a sphere. Now, my sphere is going to be a child of my cube. This means that wherever my cube moves, so does the sphere. I can also still move the sphere independently if I want to. Now, by default, everything is grey, because this means basically inherit from parent and or default. If I use the green for the cube, it still shows the same. So nothing changes. So yes, why do we have the green? We'll come to that. If I hide the parent, the child hides as well, because it is set to defaultly hide. It is inheriting from the parent. If I then turn on the sphere and make it green, I can see the sphere, I can see the child without seeing the parent, neither of which are hidden from renderer. So when I renderer, they will both be visible. So this is the reason why you have the differences. So maybe you always want the cube to be on, but for this particular instance, you want to hide the sphere. The sphere is still active. Cinema 4D is still calculating it because the tick is there. But there are some times where you want your objects to be invisible. We'll get to that with dynamics. So this allows you to control being completely hidden or choosing which particular object you want to see depending on that traffic light system.
Cool. Yeah, super handy. I mean, I think I use them in every single scene, one way or another.
All the time. Yeah.
Yeah. Would it be possible to show, or someone's saying, is it possible for a deformer to be used with multiple primitives, or do they all need their own deformer?
That's going to be my training answer. That depends.
That is our favorite saying.
That depends on what you want it to do. So let me create this scene. It's exciting, isn't it?
Beautiful.
That's it. You can tell I'm a modeler. Now, if we want to affect each of these individually, so let me do this. You can see that I have 3 different bend deformers and 3 different cubes, and I'm just going to do that. Now, if I wanted that one to bend that way, that one to bend this way, and that one to bend the other way. As you can see, I would absolutely need 3 different bend deformers doing 3 entirely different things in order to make this all work, because I want them to go in different strengths, different angles, different degrees. I would absolutely need the 3 different ways. I'm just going to turn those off. If I wanted all of these objects to bend together, then I could do that with a group. So I would select all of my cubes and I would do Alt or Option G, which would group my objects. And in this group, I would create a bend deformer, which I would put in the null object and then fit to parent. And that would just basically stick it in the middle of all of them. And then if I use one bend deformer, I can in theory bend all 3 objects at once using a single bend deformer. Then if I really wanted to get clever and fun, I could turn the other 3 on and they could continue to go in their own weird and wonderful directions, which would create God knows what, but that wasn't quite the plan. So it depends, but also yes.
Cool. Yeah, I think that was all the questions for now.
Cool. Okay. Right. In which case, I'd better throw this over to you so you can actually show some people what you can do with all of this other than just creating cubes forever.
Let's get into it. Cool. And as always, keep your questions coming with anything that I'm about to show. So let me show my screen. Can everybody see that?
Yes.
Cool, right, so let's see where we get. So the idea is I'm going to basically take all this great information that Matt's shown us, and then we're going to make our cute little robot guy here. So there's also a project file available. In the chat, I've linked to a Dropbox link. So it wasn't on there at the start, but it's on there now, and it's this guy here, and it's just called, it's this little project, basically, this one here, which is just standard Cinema 4D, and we've used the asset browser, so you should be able to access all of this stuff. And so what we're going to do, we're going to build this from scratch. We're going to see how far we get, because I don't want to kind of rush too much through this stuff. But the concepts are kind of the same. So if we don't completely finish, then that's not too big of a deal. Right, so let me move this out of the way so I can see. And I'm just going to close this down. Right, so I'm going to keep coming back to my reference here, just so I kind of remember exactly how I made this. And then, yeah, so please follow along, answer questions, ask questions, we'll answer them live, you know the deal. So this is built entirely with primitives and deformers only. And so we're going to start kind of top to bottom. So we're going to start by creating this little guy's head. And all we're going to do is grab a cube. So this is our starting shape. But as we can see kind of on our original guy, he's got there's quite a lot of kind of rounding going on, and it's also kind of shrinking as it comes to the back. And so we can do that with a couple of different techniques. So in my cube, we know we can kind of enable this fillet option, which is going to create some rounding on our primitive cube. So if I just sort of click this on, and if we come in here, we can see we now have some rounding. And if I switch on my shading lines, we can see that, we have a radius of 3 centimeters, and we have 3 different subdivisions. So we have 1, 2, 3, which is great. So we're getting some nice rounding, but this definitely isn't enough rounding. We definitely need a lot more going on. So I'm just going to kind of up this value. Let's go 25. Cool, so we have a lot more rounding going on, but because we have a larger kind of radius, we need to now add some more subdivisions, because you can see, I don't know if you guys can see here, it's looking a little bit jagged because these 3 subdivisions just aren't enough to create this nice smooth rounding. So let me just let's put 16. We don't want to go too crazy. And now we have that nice rounding. Cool. So step 1 done. Now we're going to need to create that deformation where the head kind of looks like it's shrinking at the back. So we can do that by using one of our deformers. And so if we open up our deformer menu, what's great about these icons is, as Matt was showing, they kind of represent exactly what they do. And so if we look at the taper, we can see that it's creating that kind of that shape or that deformation that we're going to need on our little robot head. So if I grab my taper, so we have our taper in here, and we just need to make them work together. So we need to make our taper a child of our cube. So all we're going to do is we're going to click and hold it, and we're just going to make it a child of our cube. And you can see we've got the arrow pointing down. Cool. Not quite done though. It's not really not doing what we think it should do, and that's because we need to add some strength. But I know straight away, I think the orientation is going to be wrong. So let's have a little look. Yeah, so our orientation is definitely wrong. So, you know, we can adjust our alignment if we want to, or we can just kind of like rotate. And so for me, I'm actually going to adjust my alignment. And because I want this to be happening on my Z axis, I can just come down, click plus Z, and go fit to parent. And so now my taper has now fit to the size of my cube, and the orientation is correct. So maybe we'll go something like 35. And now we've got the start of our robot head. Cool. So right, part one done. So now we're going to build this little ear here, and this is made up of a bunch of different primitives, and then we're going to use our placement tools to drop it onto our robot. And we're also going to use a couple of little like position techniques to get everything kind of centered together. Cool. So the first thing we're going to do is we are going to grab ourselves a tube. Let me just pull it out of here. And I'm just going to hit my R key to get my rotate tool up, or we can come over to the left. And I'm going to grab my band here, and I'm going to hit my shift key, and I'm just going to rotate in increments of 5 to 90 degrees, just so it's the right orientation. But as we can see, it's a little bit too big. So I'm going to hold my T key. I'm going to click my mouse, and I'm going to drag left across my screen, and it's going to kind of shrink it, shrink it down. And then I can just perfect this a little bit more. Maybe we'll go like, I don't know, 35 and 30. And then maybe we'll do a little bit smaller height. Cool. So I'm going to press S so I can focus on my selection. And we can see in here that we're not really getting enough rounding going on. So it's a little bit too jagged. And that's because our rotation segments by default are set to 16. And so it's not quite enough to get that nice smoothing going on. So I'm just going to double click that. I'm going to type in 32. So it's still not perfect, but the thing is we're going to be kind of like out here. So it doesn't necessarily need to be kind of overkill. So I guess the general rule is the closer you are to something, you're going to want to have more subdivisions so it's nice and smooth, versus this where when we're this distance, it doesn't matter too much. Okay, cool, right, so now let's drop this guy on here. So, you know, we could grab our move tools, we can kind of, you know, try and position this and try and rotate it perfectly, maybe go to our 4 views, you know, like we used to have to do, which is not a problem. If you don't have access to the like the placement tools, then definitely that is the way that you can do that. But what I'm going to do, I'm going to grab this. I'm just going to come in, I'm going to drop this right onto here. And now it's perfectly on there, which is such a great little asset to have. So we have the start of this ear. So the next part, we're going to do the little middle bit, which was just made up of a cylinder. Just grab a cylinder. I'm going to move it out just so we can see it. And again, I'm going to hit my R key, and I'm going to hit my mouse and my shift key just to kind of rotate this round. And we might just shrink this down again. And then we're going to go something like 20 by 20. And then we're going to just do a nice little bit of rounding on here again. And then increase our segments just a little bit more. Cool, right, so how can we now get this centered in with this? So, you know, we could still kind of position it with our normal kind of move tools or with our placement tools, but a really handy little trick is because I want this cylinder to be in the center of this tube, I can actually just make my cylinder a child of my tube. And so if I grab my cylinder, I'm going to make it a child, so we have that arrow pointing down. And then inside of my cylinder, so my coordinates menu was already open, we can just do a reset transform, or we could, zero out these X, Y, and Z position and rotation values. And then now it is perfectly placed in the middle, which is great. It's exactly what we wanted. And now I can just pull that out because it doesn't need to be in there anymore. Cool, so 2 more little bits of this is we're going to make our antenna out of a cylinder and then a sphere. And we're going to use that same kind of position technique. So we're going to grab a cylinder and it's going to be quite small. So let's do like maybe 2 by 50. I'm going to pull this out. And we're going to do that same trick. So we're going to make it a child of our tube and we're going to reset our transform. And so that's kind of not really done what we wanted. And that's because we want to keep this 90-degree rotation. So I'm just going to come in and I'm just going to zero out all the values I need, but I'm going to leave this one as it is because we don't want our cylinder to kind of go back to that 0 rotation. I'm just going to pull it all the way up to there. And then we're going to pull that back out. And then our final thing is going to be our sphere. I'm going to shrink this down. And this time we're going to make the sphere a child of our cylinder. And then we're going to reset again. And then we're just going to drag it all the way up to the top. So we now have our little robot ear. Cool. So we're kind of getting there. So what I'm going to do now, I'm actually going to group all of these elements of the ear together. And then we're going to use, I'm going to cheat a little bit and I'm going to use a symmetry generator, which normally we'd look at next week. But I think for this week, it's definitely going to be beneficial for what we're doing. So we can kind of duplicate, the ear, the arm and the leg. And it's just going to make things a lot easier for us. So how can we group things? So we can use what are called nulls as kind of ways of grouping things inside a cinema. So this up here is a null object. So if I grab that, you can see it kind of doesn't really bring anything into the viewport. It's sort of like an empty thing. And then we can grab our elements. And so I'm going to grab my sphere and I'm going to press my shift key and my tube. And then we can just make them a child of our null. And then now we have this whole group here. Another way of doing it is if we pull this out. So the way that I like to do is the shortcut way. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to highlight everything by grabbing my sphere and then holding my shift key and grabbing my tube. And then I'm going to press Option G. And it's going to do the exact same thing we just did. It's basically going to group it inside of a null for us. But it saves us having to grab this ourselves and drag and drop them in. And then I'm going to double click that word. And I'm just going to type ear. So it's a nice way of keeping everything neat and tidy, which, full disclaimer, I often forget to do. If anyone's seen any of my project files, then you'll know. Cool, right, so now let's sort of duplicate this by using symmetry to save us having to actually duplicate it and rotate it and reposition it. So generators is something we're going to be taking a look at next week. But inside of here is where we can find our symmetry, and it's the only one we're going to be looking at for today. So we can see by the icon exactly what it's going to do. So if I grab my symmetry, all we need to do is we can grab our entire group here and drop it into our symmetry. So I'm going to grab my ear, I'm going to drop it in here, and if we come round, oh look, there it is. We have our second ear. If we go into our symmetry, if you find that it's not mirroring correctly, then you might want to just adjust your plane. But for me, the default one, which is ZY, works absolutely fine for my robot ears. Right, cool. So let's do just the eyes and the mouth, and then the whole kind of like head and face of our guy is done. So what we're going to do we're going to come in and we're going to grab a cylinder. I'm going to pull it out just so we can see it. And I'm just going to rotate it in here. And we're going to have to make these values a lot smaller because we don't want, unless you want some like telescope eyes going on, which you know you may do, but hey. I'm going to change this to a radius of about 20 and then a kind of really small height of like 1 centimeter. And then again, you know, as always, just increase those rotation segments just so we get some nice smoothing. And now what I'm going to do, so if we have a look here, we can see we've got we've sort of got these like semicircles going on, these nice sort of like happy eyes. And we can do that inside of our cylinder, inside of our slice tab. We can actually just enable a slice, and then we can choose the from and to. And so luckily enough for me, this works fine. But you know, you may want to find that you kind of want different kind of eyes, and then you just have to adjust those settings. Cool. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to just use dynamic placement again on this. And I think it's not really going to work how we think it's going to work, which might be handy because then we can show how to change this. So let me drop this on here. Oh no, so it worked fine. I was thinking maybe the axis was going to be wrong, but it ended up being right. But if you find it's kind of not going flat onto your cube, you will need to just change the up direction and then potentially like rotate to get it perfect. But luckily enough for me, it's worked fine. And then again, let's grab another symmetry just so we can drop that in there. I'm actually going to zero, which one do I want to zero out? Zero out that one, and then I'm going to pull it over and then down. Cool, so we got our cute little smiley robot eyes. Nice. Right, final thing is just this guy's mouth. And all we're going to do is grab a capsule. So if we rotate this a little bit, and we're going to use a deformer for this as well, because we want to create our nice kind of like bendy smile. So we're definitely going to be using a deformer for this one. Right, let's use these handles just to kind of shrink this down and pull this in. And then you'll find I like to kind of enter my values into the attributes manager. It's just I'm used to kind of entering them in here just so they're kind of set values. Right, so let's take a look in here. And let's grab our bend deformer. And so what we need to do is we need to make it a child of our capsule. And I'm going to use this, you know, that great fit to parent feature that Matt showed us. And now we can start to adjust this strength. So maybe we'll go minus 90. And then I might just sort of rotate this a little bit. We might have a little like off to the side smile. If we look at our lines, again, we haven't really got enough segments. So when it comes to the bend deformer, as Matt was showing us, you know, making sure we have enough segments to warrant that nice smooth bending is quite an important thing. And so I need to make sure my height segments have been increased. So let's go to like 16. And so now we have our nice kind of smooth smile going on. And then I'm going to switch that back. And then I'm just going to position this on here. And then we're going to just going to flick between object and world, just so I can drop it all the way down. And then I'm going to go to my 4 views. So this is where I like to kind of have a front on look at this smile, and then we can just sort of position this perfectly, maybe where we want it. So it's a little bit of a side, like cheeky grin going on. Okay. Cool, so that is the whole head done. Any questions on any of that before we kind of get into the next bit?
Nope, nothing nearly.
Cool. Right, so again, I'm going to group all of this stuff into a null. So this is going to be my entire robot head. So I'm just going to grab everything And I'm going to Option and G, and I'm just going to name this robot head. So we have that here. Cool. So let's get to work on this guy's kind of like body. If we go back to our little reference shot, we can see in here we have, this is actually made up of a cylinder that's got a load of rounding on it. And then again, we've used a taper to kind of create that like narrowing going on. So let's do that. Let's make it. So I'm going to grab a cylinder. I'm going to pull that down, and we're just going to rotate this 90 degrees. So we've got the right kind of thing going on. And I might make it.
You know, I said we didn't have any questions.
Yes.
We now have questions.
Oh, yes.
Okay. So very quickly, how did you turn the grid lines off and on for the segments, showing the segments, I think?
Oh, sorry. So display, ground shading lines will show us our individual kind of subdivisions or polygons. And then that back to shading gives us our normal shading again. So I like to flip between the two. And so they are shortcuts. You could do NB and NA, but I thought it would be kind of more helpful to show the actual kind of way of doing that.
Yep. How does the symmetry know where the center mirror point is located? So actually the symmetry object is the mirror. So wherever the mirror is located, it will reflect whatever is inside it. So if Elly was to grab those eyes and move them all the way to the left, because she's got the symmetry object selected, sorry. So yeah, so the symmetry object is smack bang in the middle.
Yeah.
So that's where it is. If you grab the symmetry object and then move it to the right, you can see that the entire symmetry object moves, or to the left, and then you can edit the individual eyes afterwards, because this object is the mirror and then the objects either side work. So it depends on the placement of the symmetry object itself.
So mine's, yeah, dead center.
Yeah. Also, Alberto has asked, how do I turn off the world grid as well, which to be honest, I do all the time because it drives me insane.
Oh, this one here.
Yeah, which is under filter. And then world grid.
Yeah.
And then for some reason, there's also work plane as well. And I don't quite, I honestly don't know the difference between the two. But I turned off the work plane because, like you, Alberto, it drives me insane because it always seems to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. Is there a shortcut? I don't think so. But you might be able to set one on the command.
Yeah, no. Yeah, you might be able to set up your own one actually for that. Yeah. Do you know what? I'll leave it off now as well. Because yeah, it can be a little bit annoying.
Prefer it. Matthew has asked, if you use symmetry, would that still allow you to animate a character? And the answer is no. Because if you think that you have a symmetry, I mean, you could use it for modeling so that you have one side and another, but whatever you did to one side would reflect in the other. So if you started walking with the left foot forward, with the symmetry on, his right foot would also go forward, thus making a very odd animation, or he'd fall down. So you would have to make it you'd have to make it an editable symmetry afterwards. You would use it for modeling, but not for animating a character, unless you had something that was absolutely going to happen both sides. And another one, is there a rule for when a deformer or modifier is placed as a child of the object, or the object is placed as the child of the modifier? So we actually haven't got to that part yet. Oh, actually we have, haven't we? Yes, there is a rule. If it's purple, basically, it is a deformer, and therefore it goes as a child.
Yeah.
If it is green, so the three green icons, these are generators. They generate a shape based on what you put into them. So that's effectively the rule. Blue, it is a child. Green, it is the parent.
Yeah.
Another question, How can you precisely position the coordinates of another object? For example, top of the eye should be 50 centimeters from the top of the head.
So what would you, I'd calculate where exactly the head is.
Yeah, cinema isn't quite, I mean, there's a measuring tool, but to be honest, my quickest way would be to create a cube, make it 50 centimeters, make it the top of the side, and then move it down. I would use a cube as a measuring device all the time in any time that I do things like that. But because of the shape that we're currently making it's difficult to be precise with heights with this one. Although
Yeah.
in theory, you know the size of the cube, you know where the top line is based on the width and the height. You would have to do some maths and minus it. That would be the only
Yeah.
way I could think of.
Yeah.
Now here is an interesting one, of which I honestly don't know the answer.
Oh.
Is there a way for the primitive objects to be automatically assigned different colors rather than them all being the same light gray color? I know you can assign a display color, but I don't know if you can randomize it or automate it. I will look into that. Whilst you carry on, that's the last question. Whilst you carry on with the actual robot itself, because we've got 14 minutes.
Yeah, we may not finish it.
Yeah, I will see what I can explore with that one.
Yeah, I'm thinking if you do something with presets for that's more attributes of an object. Yeah. Cool. All right, cool. Yeah. So while Matt has a look at that, let's have a little look more at making this guy. Right. So yeah, we're getting to the body now. So we've made our cylinder, and now we want to kind of maybe make this a little bit bigger. So let's go like 60. And then we're going to go like 135. Oh no, 135. Super long body. And now we need to create some more rounding. And so straight away, we know that we want to kind of just sort out our rotation segments. So we're going to drop 32 in there. We may want to go higher, but for now and for this demo, we can stick with 32. And we want to make a whole load of rounding. So let's switch on this fillet. And we want to have a really kind of large radius. So let's go with 35. And again, we're going to need to up our segments because 3 is not quite like good enough for the sort of the rounding that we're after. So let me drop that onto 16, and then now we have the start of our body. And now we need to use another deformer. We need to use that that taper deformer again, just to kind of make it look like the body's sort of like coming in. So let's come into our deformers, and then we grab our taper, make it a child of our cylinder, and we go fit to parent. And again, our alignment is a bit off. So let's go plus X, and then we can bring it in there. So yeah, the cool thing about the taper is we can kind of go like a minus and create this sort of like outward shape. But for this, we're gonna bring this in, and we're gonna go. Let's leave it on 25. I quite like that. Cool. So if we come back in here, there's actually sort of like this second middle area, and this is actually super easy because we're just going to duplicate the cylinder and the taper that we just made, but make it a little bit like wider on the radius and smaller on the height, and it's going to create this sort of like area here. So we're going to grab our cylinder, and we're just going to command click and drag, and it's going to duplicate this for us. And so what we're going to do, we can come into this cylinder, and we're just going to up our radius slightly and then lower our height. So now we have this sort of like front area. Cool. So I'm going to pull these both up in a sec, but first of all, we're just going to grab a cylinder just to create this this neck. So let's go 16 by 16, and we're going to come right in here just so we can kind of position this a little better. And I'm going to grab both of our cylinder and taper deformers, so our entire body. I'm going to pull that up Just sort of put that in there. I don't mind a bit of intersecting. That is not an issue for me. Cool, right, so that's that done. So let me close this robot head bit, and we're going to just group all of this stuff again, just to keep it nice and neat. I'm going to go robot body. Cool. So yeah, we've only got 10 minutes left. So let's see if we can create our arms, and then hopefully with this stuff we just showed, you should be able to make like the leg parts yourself with some of the same arm things, or you can just come onto here and you can grab them off of the project file. So let's have a look. So how are we making this? So okay, so we've got a torus going on, and we've got a sphere, which is going to be like our shoulder, and then we have a cylinder in here that's sort of been got a bit of a bend deformer on there. So let's get into that. So we're going to grab a torus.
Quick question, Elly.
Yeah.
What were the settings for the second taper you've just done?
Okay, cool. Let me just delete that. So this one in here.
I'm not sure. I'm assuming that was the second one.
So the body is made up of this first cylinder. So let me just let me switch these off. So we have this first cylinder and our taper, which was our alignment was +X, because we sort of rotated our cylinder, and then we have a strength of 25. Then we actually just duplicated that whole thing, and we kept the taper the same. So the taper has still got the exact same settings on it, but then the second cylinder, which is this middle one, we made 65 by 100. So it's a little bit smaller. So if I remove that one, this was
Perfect.
like the second one.
Thank you very much.
Cool. No worries. Cool, so let's grab that torus again that I deleted, and then we're just going to move it a little bit down, and we're going to just hit that R key, and we're going to rotate it 90 degrees. We're going to hold T and shrink it right down. Also, let's perfect these settings a little bit. So maybe we'll go 15 by 6. And I'm going to use my lovely placement tools again. So I just grab this place tool on my torus, and I'm just going to drop it onto here. Cool. Now we need our sort of our shoulder joint, which we're going to use a sphere. And let's make it like 10 centimeters. And then we're going to use that same position technique by making it a child of our torus. And then we're going to reset our transform. So we've zeroed all of our position and scale, our position and rotation out. And now it's dropped in dead center out of my torus, which is perfect. Now I can pull that sphere out my torus because it doesn't need to stay in there. It's just the technique to get it centered. Cool, now we're going to work on our robot arm. So let's bring this in. So we're going to use a cylinder for this, and we're also going to use a bend deformer. Cool, so let's make this a little bit smaller. Let's maybe make this like 5 by 40. Yeah, let's leave it at that. Cool. So because we want a little bit of a bend going on, we're going to grab a bend deformer and make that a child of our cylinder, and we're going to fit the parent, and then we're just going to maybe do like minus 45. And what I want to do, so I want to pull everything up. So a useful thing to remember is, because sometimes I do this because I'll be working on the bend and I'll go, oh, I need to move everything up. And so I'll move it up, but actually it's only my bend that I have selected. So you want to make sure if you're then moving this whole area, you want to grab your cylinder and then move it up. Maybe we'll just go minus 50, just so it bends right into that sphere. Cool. And I'm going to increase my height segments again, just so I didn't quite have enough on there. Okay, right. So now what we can do is we can kind of steal this torus and this sphere again, because that's pretty much the same thing we have in here. So we can grab our sphere, we can grab our torus, and I'm going to hold Command, and I'm leaving Command down, and I'm going to click and drag, and I now have a second one of these. So I'm just going to position this by eye just for kind of speed. So let me just rotate that round, something like that. And then we're going to come in here. This is all just by eye. I could do that same position technique, but just for the sake of speed, we're going to leave it like that. And then maybe I'll just rotate that so it's a bit more level. Cool. So the next bit is to create this sort of forearm, which is a bit of like it's like made up of a cylinder, and we use a different deformer, which is like a bulge deformer, to make it look like it's kind of like bulging out in the middle of its arm. So we're going to grab a cylinder, and we're going to just move it all the way down, and we're going to shrink it down. So we're going to go 15 by about 60. And then we're going to make it a child of our torus. And we're going to zero out a couple of things. And so now it's centered in my torus. All I need to do is just put it down. Cool. And now we can grab our deformer, which was going to be our bulge deformer. Make it a child. Actually, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to pull my cylinder out first. I'm going to make it a child of my cylinder and then fit parent. And then now we can do like this kind of bulgy effect, or we can go the other way and get sort of like a skinny effect. Let me just pull this out here. Let's go like 35. Cool. And then again, let's just sort of, up these just so we get some nice smoothing. That's one thing that I'll always kind of do, is just adjust those segments. Okay, let's try and finish this off. We may have run just slightly, but that's not too big of a deal. Right, so the final thing is our hand. What's our hand made up of? It's a couple of cylinders. Yeah, so a whole load of different cylinders basically in there. So we're going to duplicate this cylinder. I'm going to delete my bulge deformer because I definitely do not need that. And I'm going to make it maybe even smaller than that. Maybe we'll go 8. And I'm just going to raise it up on here. And then all we're going to do is just Command and click down. And so I've duplicated it. And then we're going to make it a bit smaller. And we're going to do the same thing again. And we're going to make it a radius of 1.5. And we can leave a height of 6. And I'm just going to fillet it so we have this kind of like nice rounding going on. And then all we want to do is duplicate one that way and one that way. So we have our arm. So this is made up of a whole load of different like elements inside of Cinema 4D. So let me just group all this stuff together. So I'm going to group that together, and I'm going to write arm. And then you guessed it, we are going to just drop this straight into a symmetry to add our second arm.
Cheat. Oh, sorry, efficient.
I didn't cheat last time. Yeah, efficient. That's the real way of cheating. I'm just going to group all that one last time, and I'm going to drop that and into a null and call it a robot arm. So I'm very aware that we've nearly run out of time. So I just wanted to like go back to this. And so we can definitely make these bits ourselves based on kind of all the same stuff we've just been doing. So, that middle area is made up of a cube and then it's been twisted. And then, again, we just have our cylinder, we have our spheres, and you can kind of just steal all this same stuff and to kind of like to finish off the robot. And it was textured inside of the asset browser. And so unfortunately, we don't have time for that, but maybe we'll take a look at that at one of the other weeks. Were there any questions before I round up? Thank you to everyone who's still on with us as well.
Barry has said overruns are good. We could overrun, technically. People can watch this back. There's a couple, most of which I've answered.
Okay.
There is one. Can you lock individual elements so you don't accidentally move or select them? To which the answer is yes, sort of, but there isn't actually a kind of group lock thing, is there, where you can just select some stuff and then say, leave this alone, freeze it, don't touch it. There is a tag that we can
Well,
use.
we can sort of lock the element, can't we? No, obviously not.
No, that locks the attribute manager rather than the
Oh, I
actual
thought there
object
was a
itself.
way.
So
Yeah, so I know we can kind of right click. Oh, this is going to test me now. Where's protection?
rigging,
Sorry,
rigging.
protection. There we go. So protection tag will prevent, as you can see, everything's now been grayed out. So our axis has been grayed out. And this is like a really handy trick if you have a camera positioned in a really great place, to drop a little
Yes.
protection tag on there instead of accidentally moving it, which is what I do.
Yeah, absolutely. So do I. Another one is, does Cinema 4D have a retopology tool? To which the answer is yes. It is a generator, and I'm just trying to think where it is. It's the remesher. Yeah, there it is. That is the remesher tool. Allows you to drag and drop things in there, and it will retopologize it for you.
Yeah, well, you got quads, triangles, and stuff like that.
Yeah. How do you make the fins?
Okay, let's do that quickly because that does use two different deformers. So yeah, let's do that. You know what? Let's go. Here's one I made earlier. Let's go in here,
Yeah.
and then we're going to. Let me just switch off. Oh no, all of these, and then we're going to build this. Cool. So the way that we make these fins, so it's going to be super quick. We're going to grab ourselves a cube. I'm going to pull this over, and I'm just going to make this nice and small. So I'm going to make it something like 20 by 20 by 2. So it's nice and sort of like thin. I'm going to pull this up here and get right in there. Okay, so we're going to use two different deformers on this same cube. We're going to use, we're going to start off by doing like a bend, then we're going to do a taper. So we can kind of see the setup right here. So let's get into it. Let me grab a bend deformer. I'm going to make it a child of my cube. And you know what, for the sake of this, I'm just going to switch my sky off so we have a darker background. Might be easier to see. I'm going to go fit to parent and then move that out of the way. We're going to sort of bend this in. Oh no, as we can see, we're not actually getting the proper bend. So we need to make sure in our cube, we adjust our segments of our Y. So let me just type in 16. And so we now get this nice smooth rounding. So we can see that if we switch on our lines again or press NB, so we can now see that we have this nice bend going on. And I'm going to go to minus 90. So I have a 90-degree bend. That was the first step. Now we can grab our taper to create the sort of like thinning of our fin. So we're going to grab a taper and I'm going to drop this in between my cube and my bend. And I'm going to go fit to parent. And let's just put this in here. And so we can see this is the wrong way around. And so we can adjust our alignment, or, you know, we could just sort of cheat a little bit, hit our R key and rotate 180 degrees. And I'm just going to come back into my taper and put my strength all the way up to 100. So we have that nice sharp point. And now we have our fins that we created. And all I did was then duplicate, as you can see on here, duplicated each one and then repositioned it. So I had one to this side, one to this side, and one to the back. And then again, this leg was using like symmetry. So if we delete that and then we bring ours back, you can see if I switch my deformers back on, we can see exactly what we did.
Hooray,
Cool, so
absolutely amazing. Thank you very much.
No worries.
Right, that is it. So once again, thank you everybody for being here with us for this new exploration of R25. Um,
Yes.
and
Yeah,
thank
it's
you,
been
Ellie, for
yeah, no
making things
worries.
fun.
Thanks for all your stuff. You know, all your technical information
That's all
is
right.
mad. And just one quick little brief thing, like you know how we love to overrun. This is kind of the plan for next week. So, you know, we're going to be looking at modeling, which I'm sure Matt is something you're super excited about, right? Because you
That's
are
it. I'm on that. That's my area of expertise. I
it's
am a
definitely
modeler.
your expertise. And then we will also be looking at this lovely new spline importer. So we'll make sure we spend a significant amount of time on that. And I'll make sure that the project file is up by the Monday. So if you guys want to check that out, you can do that, but you can always like follow along on the day and we can create it there and then. And
Yeah,
yeah, we'll
thank you
see you
very
guys
much.
next week. And yeah,
Yeah,
don't
thank you
forget
very much for all the
if you
lovely
do any
comments.
work,
Sorry.
and we have a little hashtag that we're going to be using over the next 6 weeks, which is sort of like hashtag how Maxon. So if you post any stuff, just feel free to tag us in that, and then we'll definitely check that out.
And thank you very much to everybody on all the nice comments that you're all leaving. It's greatly appreciated. So yeah, thank you very much. Enjoy your week, and we will see you next Wednesday.
Yes, have a good one, everyone.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye bye.